Want an easy way to see if you could save money on car insurance? Geico gives you 3. Call 1-800-947-AUTO. Go online to geico.com or stop by the Geico office nearest you. 3 ways you could save 15% or more.
Here we are. We're having fun. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, Joey Galloway, Booger McFarland in here with me this morning. Our thanks again to A.J. Hinch, manager of the Astros, a good guy, going to celebrate a championship today. I got 2 quick notes coming out of that conversation, guys. How hard is it to repeat as a World Series champion? Each of the last 17 years, there has been a different champion in Major League Baseball. That is the longest stretch without a World Series repeat winner in baseball history. Wow. Longest time they've ever gone without a team winning back-to-back championships. And where did they come from? People talk about just how bad the Astros were when they started this rebuilding project. Listen to this, Joey. The Astros played a handful, not one, but a handful of games in 2013 and 2014 that registered a 0.0 Nielsen household television rating locally. There were literally not enough people watching to register a rating in Houston for the Astros games as recently as 3 years ago, and now they've won the World Series. I mean, and I remember talking about this at the time. We talked a good deal about it at the time because it was embarrassing, and now here they are. You want to talk about getting it exactly right. You make a bunch of good decisions, and the next thing you know, you got a parade in your city.
Well, and you have to give them credit for the process. You know, we're talking about the process with the Philadelphia 76ers. Like, this is the process, how they did it. They went about it the right way. Just when you thought they were about to peak, what was that, in 2 years ago? Yeah, 2015. Wasn't quite there. They kept the process. Now in 2017, they're champions. And Greeny, to your point about repeating, in every sport except basketball, in my opinion, is designed for parity. So what happens? The talent equals out, and it's a little harder to repeat because teams change, free agency, and things of that nature. It was tough for us to do it in Tampa as far as repeating because our team wasn't the same. And the number one thing that makes it tough is the mentality because guys don't stay hungry. It's hard for your stars and, more importantly, the foot soldiers, the role players, to stay hungry when you get just a taste of success and you get that ring on your finger.
And I'm sitting there thinking, if Houston can do it, then my Pirates might be able to do the same exact. Because honestly, because we would be down there with Houston in the basement, and we'd be like trying to scratch our way up. It'd be us and the Houston Astros down there in the basement, like, hey, who's the worst team? And then we watch them get out of it. And I'm just thinking maybe my Pirates can pull it off. But I think the other thing is, and he mentioned when other players are starting to work out, they're still finishing their season. They're still finishing their celebration as other teams are getting ready to move on and turn the chapter and get ready. And that's why I've always been impressed with what coaches like Belichick can do, what coaches like Nick Saban can do. Because the thing you said, the team changes. Guys are no longer hungry. Somehow they keep their guys hungry even through those situations of winning.
And I've always said I believe we need a stop and smell the roses period in all of sports. And I learned this when I first started covering sports as a reporter. I was covering the Chicago Bulls, and they were winning championships. It was the middle of their first three-peat. And I was interviewing Jerry Krause, who was their general manager, who just went into the Hall of Fame this year posthumously, and it was a disgrace that he didn't get in while he was alive, but that's a different discussion. And there's champagne, being poured on everybody and all this kind of stuff. And I've got my microphone, and I'm asking him a bunch of questions. And I'll never forget, he said to me, I'm behind. All the other teams are way ahead of us right now. They've already started all this and that and this and that. And I'm being held up by some of the things we're doing here. My scouts haven't had a chance, or my coaches haven't had a chance to look at some of the players that we're going to draft. The NBA draft is a week and a half away. Because I said to him, like, how do you feel? What thoughts are going through your mind? And his response was, my thought is I'm behind. And I'm thinking to myself, that's ridiculous. Everybody works their entire lives to try and get to this moment. You've climbed the mountain. Like if you were ever to climb, I don't know, Mount Everest or Mount Kilimanjaro or whatever mountain it is people like to climb, when you get to the top, the first thought cannot be, okay, which mountain am I going after next? The first thought has to be, holy smoke, I made it. Do we not have 1 minute? Can we have a minute to stand up there and bask in the glory of what we have done? And unfortunately, the way the system is set up in sports, they don't.
In sports, you don't, Greeny, because the next year somebody's trying to do it again. Like, that's the good and bad about sports. Like, the good is, if you don't succeed 1 year, you can build your team up. You have an opportunity to do it again next year. The bad is you can build your team up and you try to have to do it again next year to repeat and defend. So it's the good and the bad.
Yeah, mostly the bad. Yeah, while you're out there having the celebration right now, Mr. T, as Clubber Lang, is in a dark gym doing one-armed pull-ups, just getting ready for you. And that's the image that I always have, because that's one of my favorite movies ever, was Rocky III, and his performance in that, which I think was literally. Why are you guys looking at me like that? You don't like Rocky III?
Well, I love it, but you do realize Clubber Lang is fictional, right?
But it was a performance that was so riveting that I actually think of him as a real person. I've said many times the two greatest performances in American film history were Olivier's Hamlet and T's Lang. I think he was, Mr. T as Clubber Lang was as good as you can possibly be.
I don't even think he was nominated for a goblet or an Oscar, like whatever.
Goblet.
Whatever the award that you would give some. I don't think he was nominated.
You weren't 100% sure if the award they give to people in movies was an Oscar or a goblet?
I know they call it an Oscar. I'm just making.
But what the hell is a goblet?
Something that we would make up to give Mr. T for his performance in Rocky.
I didn't realize Clubber Lang was Rocky III.
That's Rocky III. Oh, he's Mr. T.
Drago was Rocky IV.
Yeah.
Can I get what? He won a Razzie Award for Worst New Star that year. That's the award they give. I want to see who won Best Supporting Actor that year. I want that right now. 1983. Put that on my screen. Who
the
won
Oscar?
The Oscar for Best Supporting
You honestly
Actor
want to see that?
No, I know he didn't win it. I want to see who won it. And you tell me that whoever it was, I'm guaranteeing you right now, their performance will not be as memorable as that was. Oh, it was Louis Gossett Jr. and Officer and a Gentleman.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
You hear his voice change.
He was great. That is a great movie. He was great in that.
Sorry, Clubber, you're out of there now.
Did you ever see that movie, Officer and a Gentleman? That's a great movie. And he was brilliant in that movie.
Okay, so who was better, Lou or Mr. T?
That's a toss-up. It's a toss-up.
His body language changed everything.
He just went limp.
Oh, God, was I hoping it was something we didn't even remember. I was hoping it was a movie that I didn't even recall. No, Louis Gossett, that was a great one. He was brilliant in that movie, too. Okay, so I'll give him the Oscar. But we should have given Mr. T the goblet. And either way, the point is that they should have the Astros should have the chance to stop and smell the roses of their accomplishment. Okay, let's get to some other business here. Jets and Bills last night. Joey, were you surprised that the Bills, who have been 5-2, playing so well, go into play the Jets last night, albeit on a Thursday night road game, which is supposed to be a tough spot? It's a division opponent. It's not a long trip. And that they just got pounded by the Jets last night.
Yes and no. I mean, you're surprised, yes, on the surface because, hey, it's surprising. But that's what the NFL is this year. That's just what it is. The Giants go out and beat the Broncos, for their first win. So that's just what we're seeing in this season.
Why? So you make a good point. Why? Why do you think Trey Wingo was in here the other day saying it's the most unpredictable season he can ever remember. Why do you think that is?
We don't have a great team. And last time I was here, we were talking about, can Tom Brady do it again with this team? And I said, there is no team out there that you fear. I was like, who do you fear? And I believe you brought up the Denver Broncos at the time. And I said, if the Denver Broncos is the team that comes to mind for you when you say, who do you fear? That lets you know what kind of season we're in. Right. There just isn't a great team out there that you can hang your hat on and say, that team is going to go win.
Here's how I look at it, Greeny. What separates football teams from the start of the year to the beginning? Time. Time starts to show you who's good and who's bad. What do we not have as much of now in the NFL? Time. Because of the CBA and because all these different things, time is limited. Practice time is limited. Development is limited. And so early in the season, everybody's going to be grouped together. I firmly believe by the end of November, early December, we will have an idea of who the really good football teams are because of the time that would have been allowed to separate the teams. You're right. Right now, everybody's grouped together, but the time will differentiate the teams over the course of the season.
Yeah, but why is this season different, though, than past seasons? Because the time hasn't changed. I mean, the time is the same as, say, last season. So why in this one season is it all of a sudden we are seeing this separation not happen?
I think you could look at teams changing, players changing teams. And, yes, it happens every year. But think about some of the turnover we've had in New England. Okay, New England's been perennially a very, very good football team.
And they always have turnover.
And they always a little bit more turnover, especially defensively this year. Look at Atlanta. Atlanta losing.
I don't know how many of those defensive guys I could name anyhow.
Oh, yeah, but they always
when they do have turnover.
Right, cornerback
position.
Like they always play well in that system. Yep. I just think that
Atlanta should be good.
They should be, but they're not. Okay.
Right, and that's why this season to me is so weird.
Right,
because here comes a team like Atlanta who was really good. and all of a sudden they're just not. But why? Like, how does that happen? Why does that happen? You know what I mean? Like,
there's two potential explanations that jump immediately to mind. One of them is the departure of the offensive coordinator, who last year Kyle Shanahan was getting all kinds of love from everybody. I remember Dominique Foxworth sitting here with me telling me that he is scheming guys open. He gave an enormous amount of credit to Shanahan. That's one thing. The other is what we were just talking about, is that it's hard to repeat for whatever reason. The team that loses the Super Bowl tends to struggle the following year, historically speaking. I can't put a finger on why.
I'll give you a third one, Greeny. What about the guys just aren't playing well enough? Like, we can talk about and kind of make excuses, but Louis Riddick made a good point, and I hadn't thought of that, because we want to blame the coaching and we want to blame the Super Bowl hangover. But when you look at their key players, the offensive line, Alex Mack, we lauded him last year. He came in and made a huge difference. He's not playing well. Matt Ryan, to a certain extent, isn't playing well. Now, some of that has to do with Steve Sarkisian trying to fill the role of the offensive coordinator, but some of that has to go on the players that are just not playing that well, especially on defense.
All right, Mike and Mike, Joey Galloway, Booger McFarland are with me here this morning. We're going to get back to some of the college stuff in a minute. Our friend Trevor Manich is actually tweeting at us as we speak. Have you guys seen this? Trevor has some thoughts on quarterbacks in college, so we'll get to those as well. But first, let's do a 5-point stance.
Right now on Mike and Mike.
Let's go.
It's time for the 5-point stance.
Our 5-point stance is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit them at geico.com or call 1-800-947-AUTO. Here we go. Number 5, the Eagles will be going for their 5th ever 8-1 start. In each of the previous 4 times, the Eagles either reached the Super Bowl or the NFL championship game in the years prior to the Super Bowl's existence. So if they get to 8-1, history says they make it all the way to the final. Are the Eagles right now, in your opinion, start with you, Booger, the best team in the NFL?
They're playing that way, and they're not satisfied. The fact that they went out, traded for Jay Ajayi, he says, you know what? We realize we think a weakness in our game is our running game, especially with LeGarrette Blount. He's a pounder down by the goal line, but can we get consistent running game? They said, you know what? We'll address that. I like what they're doing right now.
Joey, did you think Carson Wentz would be this good?
System-wise, yes. I believe he could be this good. That doesn't surprise me. You put a good quarterback in a good system and put some pieces around him, then they can flourish.
Yeah, he's in a good place, and he's making the most of it. Number 4, the Saints can become just the 3rd team in the Super Bowl era to win at least 6 straight games immediately after an 0-2 start. The other 2 were the 07 Giants and the 93 Cowboys. What do they have in common? They both won the Super Bowl. Booger, how are they doing this? How are these traditionally defensively challenged Saints playing great defense and winning games with Drew Brees?
Turnovers. Drew Brees has been, Greeny, consistent in his career for 2 touchdowns on average every Sunday. So the New Orleans Saints coaching staff knows they can go out and they got 14 points. If we make any play offensively or defensively otherwise, now it's 21. They're a defense that's playing to that, and they're getting turnovers. In the Saints Super Bowl year, Greeny, they led the NFL in turnovers. I don't know if that formula can last and be sustained this year, though, because you can't always count on turnovers.
Joey?
I was just about to say, are you saying that this team is a Super Bowl team? When I watch the Saints, well, that's why I thought you were taking us down that path.
Not only that, but the division hasn't been what we thought it would be.
No, not at all.
I thought Tampa was going to be good. Yeah. Carolina has been very up and down, and Atlanta hasn't been anywhere near what we expected. So the Saints, who I think I probably would have bet we're going to finish last in that division, all of a sudden look like the team
and they still have a chance, though. In this season and what we've seen in teams going up and down, they still have a chance to make you a right on that Greeny.
Maybe. They're not going to finish behind Tampa, though, Booger. The Buccaneers have been stunningly disappointing.
The Buccaneers are bad, and the reports coming out of there is that the head coach might be in over his head. I don't know that for sure, but those are the reports coming out of there.
Number 3, Alex Smith is the first quarterback to start each of the first 8 games of a season without throwing a pick since Jason Campbell in 2008. The book on Alex Smith has always been, yeah, but can he take you all the way? Can Alex Smith take this team all the way? And if he doesn't, will this be his last year as the starting quarterback in Kansas City? Fascinating situation with the Chiefs.
Yes and yes on both of those. I think he can take them all the way because Andy Reid calls plays to Alex Smith's strengths. And as long as you do that, I think the team can succeed. Their weapons aren't the traditional wide receivers. They have Tyreek Hill, and they do different things. What's the kid from Oregon that they have, DeAnthony Thomas that they have. So they have non-traditional players that they use in a college setting. But more importantly, Greeny, that defense, they have 2 pass rushers, D4, Justin Houston. They can bring pressure without blitzing. I like the formula now, and it's going to be dependent upon whether Alex Smith cannot turn the football over.
And we've heard they love Patrick Mahomes. So take us back to him, Joey. You covered him in college, obviously. They traded up to take him early in this first round.
And I believe when you go get a guy, and I like Alex Smith, and you get a guy that doesn't turn the ball over, it means he doesn't take a lot of chances. He's a dink and dunk, and he fits into the system. Patrick Mahomes is there for a reason. And so you're going to go with Alex Smith as long as you can, until you believe Patrick Mahomes can make you take the next step.
Right.
And so if you don't get there this season with Alex Smith, I would imagine in the offseason, they'll start getting Patrick Mahomes ready, because they'll feel like he is the guy that can now take us to the next step.
Next. Number 2, the Dolphins, as you know, traded Jay Ajayi to the Eagles for a 4th-round pick. Their 3 remaining running backs have combined for 371 career rushing yards. Ajayi had more than that in 2 weeks last season alone. So they have a winning record. Was it strange to you that the Dolphins seemed ready to cash in the season?
No, because Adam Gase, if you listen to his press conferences, Greeny, he was trying to make a point. He felt like the team was not playing well. Maybe from a mentality standpoint, they didn't really give a care. And you knew, based on his press conferences, he was going to have to do something to get their attention.
Yeah, this was the point without trading.
I was about to say,
but
is there nobody else?
But this
that you
this was the something
besides your guy.
Well, maybe he wasn't his guy. Like that, obviously, that's the thing that I go with.
Like the best he had. I mean,
he hasn't scored a touchdown all year, but yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Last year he burst onto the scene, and they haven't been anywhere. I mean, in no way have they been as good
Correct.
last year, and that includes with him in the running game. And then finally, Ravens-Titans might be the game that has the biggest playoff impact this weekend. Not the 2 most exciting teams in the league, but both very significant. If I told you right now one of those 2 teams is going to make the playoffs, which one is it?
Titans. I think I'll take the Titans. I don't trust Joe Flacco. Like, I've never seen a guy who went from winning the Super Bowl and that playoff run he went on to where he is now, Greeny. To me, that's a precipitous fall. I haven't seen one like that. He's not playing well at all.
Ravens,
when they went on their run, it wasn't because of Flacco.
He was playing well in it. I think it was like 12 touchdowns, no picks or something.
Yeah, he had a great playoff run.
Yeah, he did.
He just had a great few games.
I don't believe that team wins without that defense. And so,
Agreed.
and so when I see Flacco, and you've seen him in moments before,
yeah.
in seasons where in pressure moments he hadn't played well, and so this doesn't surprise me. But I will take the Titans also for the playoffs.
Especially now with Deshaun Watson getting hurt, and my screen just disappeared as I tried to push the button that would say that is our 5-point stance with us here on Mike and Mike. Joey Galloway and Booger McFarland are in here with me. Tim Tebow will join us coming up shortly as we'll look ahead to some of the big college games on this weekend's schedule, including the game they call Bedlam, Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State. And that's a matchup with 2 different quarterbacks, with Baker Mayfield and Mason Rudolph. And Trevor Manich, while we were having our conversation about quarterbacks a little while ago, tweeted at us. He tweeted at me anyway. 3 things. He wrote that a quarterback is in the Big 12 is irrelevant. Stats not important. Few college football offenses translate to NFL. Does Clemson's? What kinds of throws can he make? How does he process information under pressure? He'll be doing, he tells us, a breakdown on SportsCenter tomorrow morning on Bedlam quarterbacks, showing one important aspect for each that translates. And I can tell you, he was in our studio earlier this morning. He loves both those guys. He loves Mason Rudolph, and he loves Baker Mayfield. I'm talking about for the next level.
I disagree with translating an offense. I disagree with that point of it, because what you read, what you're looking at, and how you get the ball out, I do believe translates, and what you're taught in the college level as opposed to what you have to be able to process and be taught at the next level. So I do think that those 2 things have a correlation.
Yeah, I think the thing most people get confused, Greeny, is when you talk about the Big 12 offenses, most of them are air raid offenses. You're throwing the football 50 and 60 times a game. It's hurry up, it's slants, it's outs, it's quick screens. What can translate is when you're in the shotgun, when you take that little half step, when your foot hits throwing the football on time, rhythm, decision-making, those things translate. When I look at Mason Rudolph, I love his size. I love his decision-making. I don't love his arm talent, to use one of those phrases. I don't love that. to me, that doesn't translate as well as what you see with Baker Mayfield, being able to throw the football off platform. Prime example. Could you imagine last night Baker Mayfield in a Buffalo Bills uniform with that pass rush coming after him, trying to make some of those plays? Like, that's what you're going to have to do in the National Football League, especially if your offensive line can't protect. I mean, you could put him behind an Indianapolis Colts offensive line, not to put Andrew Luck to bed yet, but making an example, when your offensive line breaks down, you have to have, or it pays dividends if you have a guy that can make some plays with his feet, and Baker Mayfield has that added attribute like a Russell Wilson, like a Deshaun Watson, like an Aaron Rodgers. We're starting to see more quarterbacks that have that attribute than the ones that don't.
Mike, we also have In the Zone. Our friends at AutoZone ask us to pick a player who will be in the zone, get in the zone with AutoZone in the game between Auburn and Texas A&M, which you'll hear coast to coast here on ESPN Radio tomorrow. Who's got to be in the zone for that?
Hopefully the coaches, because if they don't, somebody may lose a job. All seriousness, Greeny, like Joey, I don't know how you feel about this. When you look at the 2 lost teams in the college football playoff, there is a path to steal a line from Wolf Blitzer on CNN on election night.
Auburn. You're going to tell me for Auburn.
I can see a path where Auburn can make some noise.
Because they beat Alabama and Georgia.
They beat Alabama, Georgia, and Georgia again in the conference title game.
Yeah, but that path goes through Jarrett Stidham.
You're right. It does. I agree.
Yes,
I agree.
It does.
And what does that mean?
That means not good. That means that the chances are not great. Jarrett Stidham was supposed to show up at Auburn and make them a top-tier football team. When I came down there for the SEC media days, all you SEC boys were telling me that Jarrett Stidham is going to walk in and all of a sudden Auburn's a different football team. Yeah. It hasn't gone that way. He has improved during this season. He has not improved to the point where you would be willing to pick him to beat Alabama or Georgia.
No, not on his own, but I think you can see a formula with their defense because their defense is stingy. Their defense plays really, really well. Defense. You can see a formula by how they can run the football with Kerryon Johnson. The defense can create some turnovers. My point being is Auburn has enough on their plate that if they continue winning, Greeny, they could be a 2-loss team that could come out of nowhere because every year we talk about teams that come out of nowhere that make it into the college football playoff. They would need other things to happen, but there's a path where you can see that team coming. I'm not saying I'm picking them, but there's a path.
Exactly. Yeah, there is a path, and we could probably draw up a couple paths for a few other teams that we're not willing to pick to say, hey, they can pull this off.
And then a final one, because I just clicked on my mentions here, and the first thing I'm seeing a lot of people say is, how come you guys aren't talking about Lamar Jackson? We talk about a lot of different quarterbacks. How come his name doesn't come up?
Hey, Greeny, if we didn't blame the quarterback for losing, Lamar Jackson's numbers right now?
Pretty identical.
He has more passing yards than Baker Mayfield and J.T. Barrett.
Yeah.
And he's responsible for more touchdowns than both guys. He has rushed for more yards and more touchdowns than Saquon Barkley and Adams. I'm telling you, his numbers, you should be ashamed of yourself.
So why
we're not talking about
so why aren't we considering him for the Heisman?
Because you people blame quarterbacks for losing games.
No, I think
and because their team has lost 4 games, seriously, Book, when you got nothing to do later, when you're eating your barbecue, sit down and look at Lamar Jackson's numbers this season.
All right.
Shame on all of us
for
not having him in this conversation.
Numbers are good, but Greeny, the reason we're not considering him is because how last season ended. A lot of people have buyer's remorse. We gave him the Heisman, and the way he played the last 3 games.
Nothing to do with it.
But that's the reason why. I'm telling you.
It's not fair.
I'll tell you what else isn't fair. The fact that you that are going to probably miss out on 2 or 3 golf holes today because you're going to have to leave early because you're not willing to shower in someone else's hotel room. Have a delightful time on the golf course today, both of you. Thank you, Joey. As always, we're Mike and Mike. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. Tim Tebow on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Next, Mike and Mike.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I'm so happy, I feel like I can fly.
Disclaimer, you will not be able to fly by switching to Geico. This is against the laws of physics and nature. If you find yourself flying, please seek professional and or medical help immediately. In the unlikely event you find yourself flying, you might be a superhero, or a pigeon, or a superhero named Pidgewoman, who was bitten by a radioactive pigeon. If you are indeed Pidgewoman, Geico retains all licensing publishing rights in the event Pidgewoman the movie becomes a top-grossing Hollywood blockbuster.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
To my left is a man who could not handle those temperatures under any circumstances.
Not at all.
Booger McFarland couldn't deal with 40 degrees above zero.
Well, that's close. Like 50 is my number. If you really want to know what I flourish in, when there's a 5 in the first column of the number, we're in good shape. If there's a 7, I'm ecstatic. If there are triple digits, man, I may just get down into my birthday suit and just tan.
All right, I'm going to think about other things now, literally anything else, as I welcome Tim Tebow into the conversation, who's another child of the South. Tim, how do you handle cold weather? We started the conversation there this morning. Booger comes up here to host with me. It's November. It's like 50-something degrees up here, which by our standards is beautiful. And he went into a lengthy description of how when you grow up where he grew up, your entire perception of weather is totally different.
To be honest, my entire perception of life is a little different right now, and I'm trying to get the visual out of my head. Thanks, bud.
Anytime, Timmy.
So, Tim, let's get to this. You two guys together cover SEC football for us on so much over the years at SEC Network and everything else. And so you see Georgia and Alabama 1-2 in the first college playoff. Let me ask you a two-part question on that, Tim. First of all, do you believe they are the two best teams in the country? And second, if they met on a neutral field right now, and they most likely will for the SEC championship game, who would you like in the game?
Well, I do believe they're the two best teams in the country, and I do think they're going to meet on a neutral field. And right now, I'm going to go with Alabama. And I think Alabama is the best team from top to bottom. I think Georgia is one team that can compete with them because they can run the football and they can stop the run. The one question mark I'm going to have is in this game where both teams, I think, are going to be limited in the running game, is who's going to be able to take over that game. And I think Jalen Hurts, with his ability to run, would be the X factor because of his legs, because him really being a second running back in the backfield, that I trust him more than I trust Jake Fromm. Although Jake Fromm is coming along, he's making good plays. I think that would be the X factor for me right now, and that's why I would go with lean towards Alabama in a game between the two of them.
Tim, kind of the elephant in the room as we announced the top 25 on Tuesday night was the Oklahoma-Ohio State kind of head-to-head. In your opinion, should head-to-head matter, and how much?
I think it has to matter, Boog. I think for me, as being a huge fan of college football my entire life, one of the things that's so special about the game is every single game matters. Is game one of the year, it could be just as important as the last game of the year. And I get that the playoff committee looks at teams getting better and really, making a push at the end of the year. But I think the beginning of the year has to matter. And so I look at head-to-head, and I look at the Ohio State-Oklahoma game, and I would say to you right now, if you said if they played again, who's going to win, I would say Ohio State. I would say Ohio State, might even dominate the game. But I still have to, and so they're going to be a better team in my eyes. But I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at that game and I'm going to say Oklahoma went to Ohio State and they dominated that game, and that has to wait for something. So for me, if they had the same record, I have to put Oklahoma above Ohio State because head-to-head matters in my opinion. It doesn't matter the same in everybody's opinion. But for me, head-to-head matters because every game in college football, it should matter the same. And I don't think it's just about the end of the year and finishing hot. I also think it's about the beginning of the year because that's what makes college football such a great game, is every game matters and you have to show up no matter who you're playing and no matter when you're playing.
I totally agree. I mean, this whole idea that, those games in the early part of the season, then why do we make such a big deal of them when they're played? Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but
we
teams
make a
get
very
better,
big deal
though.
of this game when they get played. But that doesn't mean that we just discount what happened in that game. If we're going to discount it, then we shouldn't act like it was a big deal when they were playing it in the first place.
I understand that point, Greeny.
That's exactly right, Greeny. That's what spring ball is for. That's what training camp is for. Like, we got to get better before the games start. And I do think it should matter teams getting better, but the beginning of the season is the beginning of the season. And if they say every game counts, then let's count them the same. And I think we should also look at teams that get better, but I think that every single game has to matter. You can't just have my bad, or a redo. No, they matter the same in my opinion.
So, Tim, with that point, let's look at two teams that have a 0 at the end of their record, Wisconsin and Miami. It's clear to me that the committee doesn't value the 0 at the end of their record. How do you view those two teams?
That's a really good question, because if we talk about the best teams, I think a lot of people would agree that they're not one of the 4 best teams. Are they the most deserving? Not right now either. But they're undefeated. So how do you view them? I don't view them in my top 4, but I think both of them have a chance to make their way into the top 4. And Miami still got some big games ahead of them, the biggest being Notre Dame. Wisconsin got some big games ahead of them, the biggest being the conference championship game, probably against Ohio State. So if both of them can run the table and finish undefeated, I think they'll make their way into the top 4. if they finish with one loss, I think it's going to be really tough because I just don't think their strength of record or their strength of schedule or the way they play is just impressive enough to get into the top four.
Yeah, the Miami one I think is basically a lock. If they beat Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, and Clemson, then they're not going to have an issue. The interesting one, Tim, would be Wisconsin. If Wisconsin, they will not have beaten a ranked team until they get to the Big Ten championship game, and that's part of that is not their fault. They played BYU. BYU's having a down year, and their side of the Big Ten has not been having a particularly good year. But that will be the reality of it either way. They will not have beaten, well, let's see where Michigan is by the time they get there, but they may very well not wind up having beaten a ranked team until they get to the title game of the conference.
Well, I think that's what's really interesting about it is if Ohio State is in the top four, if Ohio State runs the rest of their schedule undefeated, they get to Wisconsin. Wisconsin gets that W, and they finish undefeated versus a Notre Dame team that has one loss, that has quite a few impressive wins. How do you do that? And I think the committee's going to go with an undefeated Wisconsin team beating an Ohio State team over a one-loss Notre Dame team, or what about if it's a one-loss Georgia team that just lost to Alabama? And then we're really going to be asking ourselves the question, is an undefeated team, are they more deserving than a Georgia team that's 12-1, but probably one of the top 2 or 3 best teams in the country? And that's really where I'm intrigued to see what the committee does, because I'm still not sure what they mean by the 4 best teams, because if you look at the top 4, I don't always see them as the 4 best teams. Sometimes it's the 4 hottest teams. Sometimes it's the 4. Sometimes it's a couple of the most deserving. Sometimes it's the 4 best. And so, I still want to figure out what exactly they mean, and I don't think they know what they mean because there are 13 different minds that view it a different way, and that's why this thing is really tough to judge, but it's also kind of exciting.
Yeah, I think you make a good point with that. Tim, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your alma mater, the Florida Gators, Jim McElwain, that whole situation. Kind of bring us inside the University of Florida, because there are a lot of things that have gone on around there with the facilities or lack thereof, the expectations of the program. Just give us a quick observation of where the program is and the perspective of where you think it should be.
Well, I think it's fair to say the program is not where a lot of people want it to be. And I don't think the excitement was where a lot of the higher-ups wanted it to be. I don't think the passion was where they wanted it to be. I don't think the fun level of how much, ex-players were coming back and the excitement level and just everything. I don't think there was an enthusiasm or passion around the program. And honestly, I don't think either side were happy. I don't think the front office per se or the coaching staff was really happy, and so they decided to part ways. And I think, now in looking for the next head coach, I think it's important to find someone with a lot of courage and a lot of discipline and a lot of ability to handle heat, because sitting in the head coach's chair at the University of Florida it's an awesome opportunity, but it's also a really tough job because there was a lot of pressure. It's very similar to Tuscaloosa in that manner. It's going to give you a lot of chances to win, but it's going to expect the winner. And so if it's not going well, there's going to be a lot of heat. And I think if you take a look at its 2 best coaches of all time, it's Spurrier and Urban, both of those guys had an incredible amount of success, but also were drained a little bit by the end of their tenure there, and they needed a break because it's such a hot seat. And so I think that for this next head coach, because of that, it's going to take someone with a lot of ability to handle heat, a lot of toughness, a lot of belief in his system. And so I think that's going to be something that is key in the hiring process.
And we'll see where they decide to go. And, Tim, we'll see you all over ESPN all day tomorrow as we are continuing coverage of college football. Always a pleasure. Thank you. Have a great week.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, guys. See you, bud.
Tim Tebow with us every Friday here through the college football season. I'm inundated with tweets of people saying, please beg Tebow to come coach Florida. I got 1 million Florida fans saying, please beg him to come back and coach the team.
And you know what? The star that's gone away is like the backup quarterback. Everybody wants to see him out there. Tebow is a fine young man. He's trying to pursue his career in baseball. Tebow ain't a football coach.
Oh, no, he's got a lot more important things that he's going to get done than that. I'll tell you that. Okay, we'll take a short break. We'll come back. Much more to do with forward thinking here on a Football Friday. Mike and Mike. Mike and Mike, our forward thinking is brought to you by Geico, where 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit them, geico.com, or call 1-800-947-AUTO. Coming up this weekend on the NFL on ESPN Radio, Colts take on the Texans. Coverage noon Eastern on ESPN Radio. Those are the two teams that lost their quarterbacks yesterday. Luck obviously hasn't been there all year for Indy, but the news now official, he will not play at all this season. And then the terrible news for the Texans that they lose Deshaun Watson to an injury in practice. Chris tweets, why does Wisconsin get criticized for a weak schedule, but Alabama is number 2? There's two big differences. One of them is Alabama scheduled Florida State. Yeah. Florida State was supposed to be one of the best teams in the country this year. And so I think they get a little bit of credit for that. The second is they had a little stretch in their season there where they beat Vanderbilt 59-0 when Vandy was saying, we want Alabama. Then they beat Mississippi 66-3. Mm-hmm. They beat Tennessee 45-7. They're just crushing people. Mm-hmm. So their schedule isn't as good as a lot of other teams. They don't have that standout quality win, but they've been so impressive and so good and have so earned the benefit of the doubt over the course of time that I think they are, regardless of who they've played, a legit number 2 in the country right now. Candidly, I would have voted them number 1.
Well, it's one of the reasons why, even though they're number 2, Vegas has them a 10-point favorite over number 1, Georgia, on a neutral field. They don't have the resume. And it's one thing that we always look at is who'd you beat? The top 25 wins. What about the resume? And I think the committee goes into a room, and you have 13 people, 5 former head coaches that are trying to figure out what's the most valuable item to them. Some are going to value the head-to-head. Some are going to value the resume. I think the Georgia win at Notre Dame is the single most reason why Georgia is number 1, even though Vegas and most people think Alabama is a better football team.
And I know that Alabama-Auburn is the rivalry that matters to the people there, but I think nationally the rivalry between Alabama and LSU is and has been more interesting, and you're an LSU guy. Those two teams play this weekend. Sort of a different game. I get that Alabama's better than LSU, but I'm trying to read the look on your face. You have this little smile forming. What does that look mean?
Well, Greeny, because it's always been the measuring stick for Les Miles, and he's no longer there. It'll be the measuring stick for Ed Orgeron. We judge this game every first Saturday in November. This game is really played on National Signing Day in February. Alabama has won that day to the tune of coming into Louisiana, getting some of the top prospects. And so while I think LSU will be competitive on Saturday, I, in no way, shape, or form, expect them to win that game. And I think for Coach Orgeron, or if he doesn't succeed, whoever the next coach will be, they have to beat Alabama on National Signing Day. And so I think people look at the juggernaut known as Nick Saban. Nick Saban is a great coach, but he also gets the best players. And he coaches them in a way that makes them think that they're just average, everyday players. And when they get on the field, now their natural athleticism comes out. So, Greeny, you're right. It's a huge game. LSU, Alabama, everyone in Louisiana is going to be watching, but we're going to be watching very skeptical because we know this isn't one of LSU's best team, and this may be one of Nick Saban's better teams.
Bama's a 21.5-point favorite.
That may be a bit much.
In that game. So you said competitive. You would take LSU with the points.
I'd take LSU with the points.
So would I.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, there's the NFL where the Jets beat the Bills last night. Everyone is going to make a big deal about this stat. The last 2 times the Bills started 5-2, their 8th game was against the Jets. They lost, and they wound up under 500. I don't believe that will be the case with these Bills.
Correct.
I think that was a bad night last night. I think they are a good team. I think Buffalo will be over 500. I think they have a chance to make the playoffs. As far as the Jets are concerned, Field Yates came in here this morning and said, right now, you could make a case for Todd Bowles as the NFL's Coach of the Year. And I got to be honest with you, I agree.
You know, you could. I would probably go with Doug Peterson because as much as we always talk about the negative side of kind of raising a quarterback and putting him under your wing, look what they did in Philadelphia to Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, I don't care who you are. Like you can bring in McShay, Riddick, everybody. Nobody thought Carson Wentz was going to come from North Dakota State and be this good this fast. But what they did, they surrounded him with a great supporting cast. Frank Reich, Doug Peterson, people that understand the quarterbacking position. And Greeny, when you look at what they're doing right now, you got to give Doug Peterson a lot of love. And we talk about losing people. He lost his Hall of Fame-worthy left tackle, Jason Peters. So when you lose a cog like that, now how do you adjust as a head coach? Do you move the right tackle, Lane Johnson, over the left tackle? He said, no, keep him at right tackle. We're going to bring the guy in, and we're not going to change 2 positions. So I love what they're doing. I would have gone with Doug Peterson. Another big game this weekend I want to get your take on.
Yeah.
Kansas City, New England. To me, that's the marquee game in the NFL this weekend. How are we looking at that game? I like that.
Be.
No, excuse me,
They
Kansas
played
City,
each other.
Dallas. Kansas City, Dallas. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, let's see Dallas now. So Zeke is not playing, right? Have we confirmed that Ezekiel Elliott is not playing, right? I think I like Kansas City.
Yeah.
Let's see what they are without Ezekiel Elliott. They have run the ball like crazy the last couple of weeks with them. I think I like Kansas City in that game. And I thought you were going to say the really big game, of course, is Northwestern and Nebraska and Lincoln.
I was never going to say that.
Go Cats, baby. Go Cats.
Now, what is this music they're playing?
Going to run the table. It means it's the end of the show.
Oh, I know that.
Booger, enjoy the golf today. I wish I could play with you guys. It's been a fun couple of days. Thank you, my man.
Enjoyed it always, buddy.
Have a great weekend, everybody. Tons of great sports to watch. We'll see you back in Better Than Ever Monday. Mike and Mike.